Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online character build video with me, Sherman. Today guys, I bring you the Poison Fang Rogue. And before I get started, disclaimer, these are a roleplay, casual play build, not meant for meta play in any way. So now, getting into the character itself. The Poison Fang Rogues are a society of rogue assassins, brigands, blades for hire pretty much, and they are skilled at what they do, and they are masters of the Poison Fang thing. That's their thing. So now moving on to the character here. Poison Fang Rogues are Dragon Knights, and we are an Argonian with this. Any race can be the Poison Fang Rogue. I'm just letting you know that now. But yeah, really cool. So moving on, this character is primarily a damage dealer, so we have 64 points in the stamina for that, but they can also be tanks and healers. To play this character as a tank, you take the 64 points out of stamina, put enough into health to give you roughly about 30k health, and then put the rest back into stamina. They can play off tanks very well, which is really nice. But they can also play healers pretty good too. So you take the 64 points out of stamina and you put it all into magicka, and that's how you can play a healer. Now we are using a special type of food for this build to work properly. So moving on to the stats, we have 14k magicka, 19k health, 30k max stamina. We do have a 585 mag recovery, 321 health recovery, and a 1337 stamina recovery. Going over our weapon damage, we have 2502 with a 1607 spell damage, 19% spell critical, and a 46% weapon critical. Now going over our resistances, we do have 16k spell resistance with 15k physical resist. And moving on down here, we are using the Lover Mundus Stone for increased spell and physical penetration. Along with that, we are using the Dubious Cameron Throne food. Now, you can also use RTM Takeaway Broth, but that is a little bit more expensive, and this one is not. With the Dubious Cameron Throne, you get max stamina recovery, or so you get stamina recovery, you get max stamina and max health for 2 hours. Now, moving on to our equipment, but before I do that, actually, I want to go over the Mundus Stone thing. If you want, you can also use the Thief Mundus Stone with this. But if you want to play this as a healer, you probably want to use the Atronach Mundus Stone to boost your mag recovery. And it's very important that you do. Trust me on that. And if you want to play this as a tank, you're probably going to want to use the what's called the Lady Mundus Stone to increase your physical resistance. Alright. Moving on now to the equipment. For playing this as a tank, you will use tripods. These are going to effectively give you health, magic, and stamina and back. Along with that, they grant you major fortitude, intellect, and endurance, increasing health, magicka, and stamina recovery by 20%. Like I said, we do use Dubious Cameron Throne as our primary food for when we're playing damage dealer. This gives us high stamina recovery, it gives us good health, and good max stam. When you do play this as a healer, you are going to use tripods. This gives you magicka back. It also gives you mag recovery and major prophecy and major sorcery, increasing spell damage and spell crit for a certain amount of time. And then when you are playing a stamina damage dealer, which is your primary role, you will be using the physical power pots or stam power pots, and these do the same thing as spell power pots. They give you the same and reverse. So you get major brutality, major savagery, major endurance, and stamina back. Now, when you are playing this as a tank, you will want to use the Tri-Stat food, and also when you play healer, Tri-Stat food. Alright, moving on to the gear set. Starting with our monster set, Spawn of Mephala is our primary set we use for our monster set, and that is because of the benefit of it. So 1 piece, you add max stamina. 2 piece, when you deal damage with a fully charged heavy attack, you create a web for 10 seconds that deals X amount of poison damage every second to all enemies within 4 meters and reduce their movement speed by 50%. This effect can occur once every 10 seconds. Alright, So it's a really good set for CC and damage. The next set we use is called Night Mother's Gaze. Now this one, you deal X amount of damage not X amount of damage, sorry. 2-piece spell crit or weapon crit, 3-piece weapon damage, 4-piece weapon crit, and then the 5-piece. When you deal critical damage, you apply Major Fracture to the enemy, reducing their physical resistance by 5,280 for 6 seconds. The good thing about this set is that you can get that Major Fracture on multiple targets. So it's not just one enemy, it's any enemy you hit with critical damage. Alright, moving on now to the next set that we're using, and that is the Vipers set. Now, Vipers is a really good set for this, and I know people want to know what dungeons everything drops in. I'm not doing that this week. I did it last week to kind of just show people, but this week I'm going to leave that out. Well, I'm going to try it again next week. But the Ring of the Viper, or the Viper set, 2-piece adds weapon critical, 3-piece max stam, 4-piece weapon critical, and then when you deal damage with a melee attack, you deal an additional 8,380 poison damage over 4 seconds, and that can happen every 4 seconds. So you're pretty much going to have poison going off from Viper Sting all the time. If you haven't noticed, this thing is dual wield on both bars. So, going over the enchants and traits, starting with the monster set, we are using an infused helm, medium, with a tri-stat enchant, and the infused helm to boost the effectiveness of the enchant. And the tri-stat is there so we can hybridize. Now moving on to the shoulders, we are using max stamina enchant with the divines. This is to maximize our Mundus Stone use and our stamina pool. Moving on to the chest, we are using a reinforced heavy chest with the tri-stat so we can hybridize, and then the reinforced to maximize this heavy piece of armor's resistances to its maximum value. Moving on to the gloves, we are using a medium gloves, divines, max stamina, Mundus Stone, and stamina pool. And then moving on to the belt and boots, both divine stamina. And the belt is light, the boots are medium. And this is so, again, the max stamina is just there to maximize our stamina pool, and the divines is to increase our Mundus Stone effectiveness. Now moving on to the legs, we are using tri-stat infused to maximize our resource pool, but also the infused to give us a higher resources from that enchant. Alright. Going over the jewelry, starting with the rings, we are using 2 tri-rune rings with weapon damage enchants. This is to maximize our weapon damage and also to hybridize our character into multiple roles. Then we are using a bloodthirsty necklace with a stamina recovery, and the stamina recovery is there to give us higher stamina recovery, but also the bloodthirsty is to increase our damage to enemies under 25% health by 10% more damage. Alright. Moving on to the weapons, starting with the main weapon we are using a Sword of the Viper, sharpened with a poison damage enchant. This actually works out really good because that sharpen enchant increases our physical and spell penetration by X amount, and that poison damage just adds to our overall effectiveness. Moving on to the offhand, Nirnhone absorbs stamina. Now this will deal X amount of stamina damage and restore X amount of stamina every time it procs. And Nirnhone is to increase the weapon damage by 15%, so we get a higher weapon damage on our offhand. And because of that, we get the offhand passive, which is 6% more weapon damage. Alright, moving on to the back bar. We are using an infused weapon damage enchant. Now this will increase our weapon and spell damage by 226 for 5 seconds, but we also have the infused, so it increases the weapon enchantment effect by 30% and reduces the enchantment cooldown by 50%. So we use certain abilities to proc this, and I'll show you guys when we get to the skills how we keep this applied. On the offhand, we are using another Nirnhone with an absorbed stamina. Now, people are going to question, why 2 absorbed staminas? You guys will see why when we're doing our rotation. This thing can keep that absorbed stamina proccing constantly this way. So we are constantly getting back 177 stamina every 5 seconds. Alright, now, moving on to skills. And starting with our class skills, I do take all the active abilities, ultimate, and passives to take advantage of every aspect of my character so I can play him in all 3 roles more effectively. So I take all 3 class lines and passives, active abilities, and ultimate. Same thing with just so I can, like I said, so I can more effectively play the character in any role necessary. Now moving on to weapon skills. We use only dual wield with this. Now you can use a bow back bar if you want to, but after doing some testing and everything, I can actually pull the same numbers, so I said this works out fine. But we do use the ultimate, active abilities, and passives for this. Moving on to the armor passives. Light armor, we take the top 3. Medium armor, we take all of them, plus the active ability. I use shuffle in PvP, so heavy armor, top 3. Now moving on to world skills, soul magic. You can be a vampire and werewolf with this. Either one works, and it's effective. So on soul magic though, the ultimate, the active ability, and the top passive are optional, but I take them because I do use those abilities, and I take advantage of that passive when I'm solo playing or I'm just doing questing, and sometimes even in dungeons. The soul summons and soul lock I always take. Moving on to guild skills, and I'm going to go through these really fast. So Finder's Guild, ultimate, active abilities, and passives. I take them all. Same thing with the Mage's Guild and Psijic Order. The reason why is so I can take advantage of my character at any situation, with any role, with a multitude of different skill choices. Moving on to Undaunted, I do take all the active abilities, so I have some group synergies I can use when my group needs them. Moving on to Alliance War, assault skills. I do take the ultimate and 2 of active abilities to use when I'm playing the game in PvE. The rest of them I would say work better in PvP, except for maybe rapid maneuvers. Same thing with the support line, ultimate, 2 active abilities, and 1 passive here. Now this passive can be used in PvE. Moving on to racials. We are an Argonian with this. Any race can work though, remember that. And with being an Argonian, you get Life Mender, increases your healing done by 6%. This really helps when you're playing more of the support side or the healer side. And then Argonian Resistance increases your max health by 1,000 and disease resistance by 2310, and you also gain immunity to disease status effect. Moving on to Resourceful, we get increased max magic by 1,000, and then when you drink a potion to restore X amount of health, magic, and stamina. This makes it really good for them. Even using like power pots, they get health, magic, and stamina back. Crafting, alchemy, medicinal use. This when using potions, resulting effects last 30% longer. And then on provisioning, Gourmand and Connoisseur, both of these will make your food and drinks last for a total of 20 minutes extra. Alright, now moving over the skills we have on the bars. Starting with the first ability, we are using Blood Craze. Yes, I know, I'm going to hear it again. I use Blood Craze a lot. But there's a reason for it. This does X amount of physical damage up front, X amount of physical damage over 10 seconds, and then you also heal every 2 seconds for X amount for the duration of 10 seconds. Moving on to the next ability we use, Noxious Breath. Now this also does Major Fracture, just like your armor set, but this does it in a cone in a 10-meter radius in front of you. It does not do all around you like the set does. So this is really nice when you're got a pack of trash standing right in front of you. But it does X amount of damage up front, X amount of damage over 10 seconds, and on top of that you get that Major Fracture. The next ability we have is called Rapid Strikes. Now this does X amount of damage in 5 consecutive hits in a row. Each hit damage is increased is increased by 3% with each hit. The final hit deals 300% more damage. See, if you guys haven't noticed, I actually use Rapid Strikes with Blood Craze, or I use Rending Slashes with Bloodthirst. So that way I always have one of these that's healed. That's a heal, and one that's a major damage thing. Next ability you have is called Venomous Cloth. This deals X amount of damage up front, X amount of damage over 10 seconds, and the poison that seeps in the target deals increased damage the longer it lasts, dealing 12% more damage every 2 seconds. Next one, Shrouded Daggers. This one's really cool. I love this ability. You throw a dagger, it deals X amount of damage at one target, then it bounces 2 more times to 2 nearby targets, dealing increased damage with each hit. You also gain Major Brutality, increasing your weapon damage by 20% for 20 seconds. Moving on, we have Thrive in Chaos. Now this one's really cool because this one you slash enemies in front of you, dealing X amount of physical damage over 8 seconds and healing you for 58% of the damage done. Each enemy hit increases your damage done by 5% for the duration up to a maximum of 30%. 30% more damage. So this is our primary ultimate we use. Moving on to the back bar, we have Rearming Trap. Now this takes 1.5 seconds for the trap to arm. Once you place it, it does X amount of damage when it triggers and X amount of damage over 6 seconds. It also immobilizes enemies for 6 seconds and grants minor force, increasing your critical damage by 10%. And after being triggered, the trap resets and can be triggered one more time. Moving on to the next ability, we have Still Tornado. This is a great AoE spammable for when you're fighting trash. This is why we have it on the back bar with a lot more area of effect damage abilities. And that's just because it does do all that damage. But in a 9-meter radius around you, and every enemy you hit can get major fracture applied to it, because this can deal critical damage. And these are in the wrong places, sorry. So Quick Cloak is the ability we should have here. And this one, you envelop yourself in razors, gaining major evasion for 15 seconds, reducing your damage taken by area of attack by 25%. Every 3 seconds it pulses, dealing X amount of physical damage to enemies within 5 meters. This is where you proc your enchants on the back bar and you keep them up all more effectively. And then you also gain minor or major expedition for 4 seconds, increasing your movement speed by 30%. See, with the 15 seconds on this and it proccing every 3 seconds, it can proc your enchants on the back bar more effectively and keep that weapon damage proc going, plus that absorbs stamina. Next ability we have is called Razor Caltrops. This does X amount of damage on when you throw it out, it explodes, dealing X amount of damage, and then every tick of damage, it deals X amount every second, and also reduces the movement speed by 30%. Now this lasts for 12 seconds. Then it should be your Steel Tornado, and then your next ability is going to be Flames of Oblivion. Now this is really cool ability. This one launches 2 fireballs at nearby enemies every 5 seconds, dealing X amount of flame damage. While slotted though, you gain Major Prophecy and Major Savagery, increasing both spell and weapon critical by 2191, and this ability scales with your highest offensive stat. Now a lot of people are going to say, why aren't you using one of your class abilities here from the Earth and Heart to proc your Minor Brutality? You can do that. You could use Eruption, which does flame damage every second and reduces movement speed by 70%. This is a really good one you can use, but at the same time, Flames of Oblivion gives you that Major Prophecy and Major Savagery. So it's really nice on the back bar here because of that higher spell damage. So moving on to the next ability, we do have Corrosive Armor, and this one deals X amount of poison damage. Basically what it does is you oxidize your blood with green dragon's blood in your veins, limiting incoming damage by 3% of your max health and dealing X amount of poison damage to nearby enemies each second for 12 seconds. While active, your attacks ignore physical resistance. So this is really nice if you want to get through their resistances and deal a lot of damage. So I use either this or the other ultimate I have for my damage over time, or for extra damage. Alright. Now that I've done that, you guys, we're going to go over the passives, or the passives, this champion level stuff, champion points. Starting with the red tree, we have 56 in the Ironclad. This reduces your damage taken from direct damage attacks by 20%. We do have 38 into medium armor focus, increasing your physical resistance by 3250 while wearing 5 or more pieces of medium armor. If you guys didn't know, Dragon Knights and Templars and Bretons get increased spell resistance, so you don't have to put anything into spell resist for those ones. You primarily want to put into like the medium armor, anything that gives you physical resist, and 38 points is going to give you just enough that's going to put you right under the spell resist. Moving on over here, we have 31 into Thick Skin, reducing your damage taken from damage over time effects by 13%, 43 into Hardy, reducing damage from physical, poison, disease damage by 10%, and 43 in Elemental Defender, reducing damage taken from Flame Frost, Shock, and magic damage by 10%. Moving on to the final red tree, we have 40 into Bastion, increasing the effectiveness of your damage shields by 16%, 19 into Quick Recovery, increasing your healing received by 5%. And then moving on to the green tree, we do have 40 into Warlord, reducing your break free cost by 16%, 16 into Sprinter, reducing your sprint cost by 10%, 16 into Bashing Focus, reducing your bash cost by 10%. And then moving on to the middle green tree, we have 75 into Mooncalf, increasing stam recovery by 14%, and 43 in Arcanus, increasing mag recovery by 10%. Now, I know I'm going to get questioned on this, so I want to clarify something. I did some testing, and I put the 43 into Tenacity to give me more magic and stamina back for my fully charged heavy attacks. But in light and medium armor, if you're not using a Resto Staff, there's no reason to put into Tenacity. If you're not wearing heavy armor, there's no reason to put into Tenacity. The reason why is you don't get near as much resources back as using a Resto Staff or heavy armor. So even putting 10% into here to where you get 40% of the resources back compared to what you would get in heavy or Resto Staff, where you get 70%, 74% versus or 69%, I would much rather get that over 40%. You still get 30% when you do a light or a heavy attack and resources. And the reason I put in Arcanus and Mooncalf is this way, if I need to take advantage of having that mag recovery, I have that already there. Moving on to the green tree, we have 43 into Tumbling, reducing your dodge roll cost by 16%, 40 into Shadow Ward, reducing your block cost by 16%, and then moving on to the blue tree, we have 43 into Blessed. This increases your healing done by 10%, and then moving on to the middle blue tree, we have 35 into Physical Weapon Expert. This increases your light and heavy attack damage done with two-handed, one-handed, and shield, dual-wield bow weapons, and werewolf form by 20%. And then we also have 40 into Mastered Arms, increasing your damage done with direct damage attacks by 16%. This also, just so you guys know, unlocks Retaliation. When you block a heavy attack, your next light attack used within 7 seconds deals 30% more damage. You also get Reposit. It's not Repost, it's Reposit. When you block a melee attack, you have a 15% chance to deal X amount of physical damage to the enemy. This effect can occur once every 5 seconds. And then Butcher increases your damage done with light and heavy attacks by 5% to enemies below 25% health. Moving on to this tree, we do have 56 in the Mighty, increasing your physical, poison, disease damage done by 12%, 56 in the Precise Strikes, increasing your critical damage and critical healing with stamina abilities by 20%, and then 40 in the Thaumaturge, increasing your damage done with damage over time effects by 16%. The nice thing here is you do get Last Stand. If you fall below 20% health, you gain Major Heroism, granting 3 ultimate every 1.5 seconds for 8 seconds, and that effect can occur once every 20 seconds. You also get Perfect Strike, Exploiter, and Opportunist. Alright, now that I've shown you guys that, we are going to do 2 quick parses, one on this tiny little guy here, and this guy is to represent your damage done in a dungeon. And this one up here is to represent your damage in a organized group in a trial, a fully on organized group. So, first things first, we're going to drink our potion. We're going to go through our full rotation in here, and it's going to look a little crazy at first. So we did about 25k DPS. Normally I can do about 28 to 30k DPS with this on that target skeleton. But as you guys can see, we have 3314 weapon damage with a 56% weapon critical, 80% critical damage, and 10,000 physical penetration. That's why we can deal so much damage. Lots of pin. Next up, we are going to go over here and parse on this one. Same thing. We're going to do the whole rotation all over again, but this time we're going to use some ultimates in here. It does a little bit of better damage than some of the other stuff I've put out. But there you guys go. That does about 40k if you can keep the rotation up perfectly. And it can actually do about 45k if you're really good. But I'm going to go ahead and let this finish off. And once it's done and we leave combat, I'm going to show you guys what this thing looks like on the parse. So parsing, this thing gets up to almost 4,000 weapon damage, 62% weapon critical, 32k max stam, 80% critical damage, and 4,000. It says 4,000, we actually get 100% penetration. I don't know why it reads that. But as you guys can see, some of our abilities do just really absurd damage here. Like our daggers, if I can find it, the Thrive in Chaos, as you can see, deals X amount of damage on average, and then it's crit, and this is, or it's maximum, but this is 3 out of 5 hits, and that's what it did in each hit. So it does a lot of damage. Alright, now that I've shown you guys that, we're going to make some quick adjustments real quick so we can make this a capable damage dealer in a dungeon. So we're just going to move that. We're going to go over here, and we are going to move this away, and this away, because we need a few buffs here. So what we're going to grab here is we're going to grab our Draconic Power, Hardened Armor, and then we are going to go into our Alliance War, and we are going to grab the Assault Skill, Resolving Vigor, and then on the front bar we are actually going to be using the Undaunted Spiked Bone Shield. Alright, now we're just going to jump over to the Depths of Malatar dungeon here in Gold Coast, and just to let you guys know, this is the latest dungeon added with the Wraithstone DLC or Wrathstone DLC, and it is a newer dungeon, so it is more, it's considered a more difficult, challenging dungeon than your average dungeon. So that's one of the reasons why I chose it. Now, a lot of people have already asked me, why don't I do the other dungeon, Frostvault? Frostvault has a first boss encounter, has a one-shot mechanic that if you don't know how to avoid it, it will just kill you. So it's kind of like, I want to show you guys what this thing can really do. So, and now you got to remember, this is also in a solo play purpose. So this is going in here as a solo player, not as a tank or damage dealer. So if I came in here with a group, more organized play, all that, this thing would do a lot better damage. So. And yes, I wasn't even using that, the Mephala, Spawn of Mephala, but if you can get that into your rotation, that thing adds so much extra damage. That's why I wasn't able to hit the 45k, is if you can get it into the rotation, and that's the hard part. I better stop, or if I don't die, I will make him run away in fear. And so he killed me, he backstabbed me. What a dweeb. Alright, but that is the Poison Fang Rogue, guys. I hope you guys like this build. I've been having a lot of fun making these builds for you guys. So this week's builds are just, to me, are a lot of fun, and they work out really well. So this, again, is the Poison Fang Rogue, and you guys know what's coming next. If you guys like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can subscribe. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.